What if I told you that stupidity is not a mistake, not a failure of education, not a product of laziness, not something that can be fixed with the right information? What if stupidity is exactly what nature intended? What if the fool who infuriates you every day, the one who is always wrong and always certain, is not a glitch in the system, but the system working perfectly? Arthur Schopenhauer sat with this question for 50 years, and the answer he arrived at is the most uncomfortable idea in the history of philosophy. Because it means the world was never designed for people like you. It was designed for them. And once you understand why, something extraordinary happens. You stop fighting it. You stop being destroyed by it. And you finally understand how to use it. Subscribe. We go this deep every week. Let's begin with the most radical reframe Schopenhauer ever offered. Stupidity is not the absence of intelligence. Stupidity is a fully optimized system, optimized for a different goal than the one you think intelligence is for. Here is what he meant. For almost all of human history, 99% of our time on this planet, survival required speed, not depth. The brain that reacted fast survived. The brain that questioned survived less. The brain that was confident, even wrongly confident, had a decisive advantage over the brain that was uncertain but accurate. Certainty is faster than truth. And in the ancient world, fast was alive and slow was dead. So evolution didn't produce stupidity by accident. It refined it over millions of years into something extraordinarily efficient. The unreasonable, emotional, reactive mind that drives you insane every day is one of nature's greatest success stories. Now, Schopenhauer's specific philosophy. He believed that underneath human consciousness, underneath thought, reason, and reflection, there is something older. He called it the will. Not willpower, not choice. A blind, animal, biological drive that wants to survive, reproduce, dominate, and persist, without any philosophical justification for doing so. And he observed something devastating. Most people never escape the will. They believe they are reasoning. They believe they are thinking. But what they are actually doing is rationalizing, finding reasons to justify what the will already decided. The argument that goes in circles. The opinion that cannot be changed by evidence. The certainty that has no foundation. These are not failures of logic. These are the will doing exactly what it was built to do. Protect itself at any cost. Here is the mechanism that makes this truly inescapable. To recognize a limitation in your thinking, you need a framework that sits outside that limitation. You need a vantage point above the room you are standing in. The person with limited cognition has no such vantage point. They cannot see their ceiling because their ceiling is the highest point they know. They feel complete. They feel informed. They feel certain. And that feeling of certainty is not a performance. It is genuine. It is the honest experience of someone who has never seen anything that would make them doubt. Schopenhauer wrote about this with devastating precision. The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. everything is explained. Everything is simple. The questions that keep better minds awake at night simply do not occur to him. This is not cruelty. This is an exact description of a cognitive structure. The closed room has no windows, and the person inside has no reason to look for them. Now, the part that will rearrange how you see every social situation you have ever been in. In the social arena, the unreasonable mind has a structural advantage over the reasonable one. Not sometimes, almost always. Here is why. The reasonable mind updates. When confronted with evidence, it revises. When it finds it has been wrong, it admits it. This is the mark of genuine intelligence. In a debate, this looks like backing down. The unreasonable mind never backs down. It escalates. It repeats itself louder. It shifts goalposts. It attacks the person rather than the argument. It manufactures new certainty on the spot. And to the watching crowd, the one who never backed down looks like they won. Because crowds cannot evaluate arguments. They can only evaluate confidence. Schopenhauer watched this mechanism destroy his own career in real time. Hegel, whom he considered a fraud, filled lecture halls. Schopenhauer's truth emptied them. The crowd followed confidence. It always does. And now, the part that explains why every intelligent person eventually gives up on changing minds. When you present evidence to a person whose identity is attached to a belief, something counterintuitive happens. They do not update. They harden. Psychologists call this the backfire effect. The more solid your evidence, the more threatening it feels to them. The more aggressively they defend the original belief. Your logic is not changing their mind. It is activating their immune system. And their intellectual immune system is far more powerful than your argument. Schopenhauer understood this, not as a psychological phenomenon, but as a metaphysical one. The will does not reason. The will defends. And when you try to reason with the will, when you bring logic to a fight that was never about logic, you're not in a debate. You are in a territorial dispute. And the will plays that game far better than your intelligence does. Now the part nobody talks about. What prolonged exposure to unreasonable minds actually does to yours. Schopenhauer called it being dragged into the mud. And he was not speaking metaphorically. When you are forced to engage repeatedly with irrational thinking, to predict it, navigate around it, respond to it, defend against it, your brain builds detailed models of how that thinking works. And the more time you spend inhabiting those models, the more your own thinking begins to mirror them. You start reacting instead of thinking. You start defending instead of reasoning. You start measuring your worth by whether you won the last argument, rather than whether you were right. This is how the intelligent person slowly becomes a cruder version of themselves. Not by adopting stupid beliefs, but by spending their energy on stupid battles. The ring is the trap, not the opponent. So, what did Schopenhauer actually prescribe? 3 responses. First, intellectual withdrawal. not emotional withdrawal, not contemptuous withdrawal. The deliberate, strategic decision to stop spending intellectual energy on minds that cannot receive it. This is not giving up. This is correctly identifying where your energy produces returns and where it disappears without a trace. Second, redirecting toward output. Every hour spent arguing is an hour not spent building, not thinking, not creating, not producing the work that will outlast the argument. Schopenhauer wrote his masterwork in his 30s, in years of near total isolation, while the world ignored him completely. That work is still being read. The people who ignored it are not remembered at all. Now, the part of this video that most people skip past, because what I am about to say applies to you, to me, to everyone watching this. Schopenhauer did not believe that intelligence was binary, that you were either thinking or you were not. He believed the will operated in all of us, that every human mind had domains where it reasoned clearly and domains where the will had taken over without its owner noticing. Which means there is a topic right now where you are the unreasonable person, where your certainty is a product of the will and not of evidence, where someone else's logic is bouncing off you exactly the way logic bounces off the person you are frustrated with. The question Schopenhauer asks, the question that separates minds that grow from minds that don't, is not whether this is happening. It is always happening. The question is whether you are the kind of person who wants to find where. Now, the part of this video that most people skip past, because what I am about to say applies to you, to me, to everyone watching this. Schopenhauer did not believe that intelligence was binary, that you were either thinking or you were not. He believed the will operated in all of us, that every human mind had domains where it reasoned clearly and domains where the will had taken over without its owner noticing. Which means there is a topic right now where you are the unreasonable person, where your certainty is a product of the will and not of evidence, where someone else's logic is bouncing off you exactly the way logic bounces off the person you are frustrated with. The question Schopenhauer asks, the question that separates minds that grow from minds that don't, is not whether this is happening. It is always happening. The question is whether you are the kind of person who wants to find where. Third, cognitive hygiene. The deliberate curation of what enters your mind, what conversations you have, what arguments you enter, what environments you inhabit. As if your thinking were a physical space you were responsible for keeping clean. Schopenhauer wrote, and this is direct, "The man who chooses his company carefully protects something more valuable than his time. He protects the quality of his own thinking, for the mind takes the shape of what it spends its hours engaging with." This is not arrogance. This is not elitism. This is the same principle that makes you careful about what you eat, what you breathe, what you let into your body. Your thinking is shaped by the thoughts it spends its time responding to. Choose accordingly. The stupid person in your life is not your enemy, but the time you spend fighting them is. Stupidity is not a flaw. It is a feature that nature spent millions of years perfecting. A feature that dominates social life because social life was built for the will, not for reason. A feature that will never disappear, because it was never meant to. And once you truly understand this, not as a complaint, not as a justification for contempt, but as a law of nature, as neutral as gravity, something extraordinary happens. The frustration drains away. The exhaustion lifts. The need to fix it, to argue it into submission, to educate it into transformation, quietly dissolves. And in its place, clarity, energy, the specific quiet power of someone who has stopped fighting the weather and started using it. Schopenhauer waited. His work didn't. And that work, written in obscurity, ignored in his lifetime, dismissed by the very minds it was most accurately describing, shaped the next 2 centuries of human thought. Stop arguing. Start building. That is the only answer Schopenhauer ever actually gave. Subscribe.